by the river at the Christian Moerlein House. It's a very special Fifth Mascot, and it's only on WCPO.com with Mr. Satin and Mike Canan, who invented the internet. A very special guest with us today, a man who was Harry Wright's house guest back in 1869, Greg Rhodes, the Reds historian. I'm Ken Broo.
He still owes me for that.
Yeah, I know. Harry never cleaned his socks up.
No, but they were red. They bled all over everything.
They bled all over the place. Well, all right, so here we are. It's All-Star Week. It's officially begun. I'm kind of fired up about this. Greg, we were talking before we went on the air, 53, 38, 88, and now.
You know, I wasn't involved with the team as much in 88, and so this is sort of my first time through everything that goes on with this. And, you know, for a city that's used to baseball holiday every year. I mean, we know how to do this, right?
Yeah,
but yeah, this is like opening day on steroids, man.
Yes,
this is so cool.
I was trying to go through the lineups last night and just try and figure out how many future Hall of Famers may be on the field on Tuesday night. I came up with 8, and I included Bryce Harper in that, although he's very young in his career. But I think the last time this game was here in 88, there were 6 Hall of Famers, right?
8 would be a low number.
Yeah.
For a typical All-Star game, you're going to get a dozen or more. I mean, in 38 and 53, which of course that was also part of the heyday of when guys were a lot more guys were getting elected to the Hall of Fame at that, from that time period. But there were over 20 Hall of Famers on the roster, so you would have seen, you know, I mean, Jackie Robinson, here's Stan Musial, Willie Mays, and Bill Dickey, Jimmy Fox. I mean, all of those great names from the 30s, 40s, 50s.
It was amazing, and of course, in 38 when this game was here, Johnny Vandermeer pitched for the National League.
Yes.
It was 3 weeks after throwing his second no-hitter.
Wow.
And here he is on his home turf. I'm trying to get a gauge about what the game meant back then, because back then it was in its infancy. It was only 5 years old. It was kind of an experiment, I think, in 33. But I think by 38 they knew they had something special.
Well, yeah, they did. I mean, you're right. It started off as a one-off deal, and it just got such great reception from the fans that they decided to continue it. So by 38, it's pretty well established. Vandermeer is the star of the baseball world, having pitched those 2 no-hitters 3 weeks before. He starts the game in front of the hometown crowd. Wow. I mean, how cool is that? He ends up getting the win.
Yeah.
And but, you know, I think back then, and this is something that's kind of lost on us today, it was the novelty of seeing the great American League players and the great National League players all on the field at the same time. We see now interleague play, and with the video and TV and everything, I mean, we see these guys all the time. We're so familiar with them. But back then, to see Lou Gehrig walk up to the plate when you've probably never seen him before. In fact, we've got an audio clip of Red Barber calling the 1938 World Series from here. I mean, it's All-Star game here in Cincinnati.
Wow.
And in his description of Gehrig, he says, "First time we've seen Gehrig." And you know, I'm sure it was true. It probably he had never seen him before.
Well, we've had this discussion. I'm over interleague play. I don't need to see the Indians 6 times, and I could do without seeing the Twins forever. I love the mystique, and maybe this is just an old guy, but I love the mystique of not seeing these players except for one night in the middle of the summer, and then obviously the World Series, and then you're only seeing one team.
I think that's a great point. I think that's one of the things that interleague play has really cheapened the All-Star game so much, to the point that I personally don't have a whole lot of interest in it as a baseball fan. I want to watch the guys that I like, but it's an exhibition that sort of means something, but doesn't really mean something to the average fan. It means something to 2 teams, the teams that play in the World Series at the end of the year. If you're the Reds and your team has basically no shot of being in the World Series, you care about your own guys.
What? I mean, come on, we don't have it just yet.
Where were you before this show?
Also, you know, there's that Santa Claus guy.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe I shouldn't say anything. So.
Santa Claus.
Yeah, ever since, you know, it means something at home field, it has definitely taken a little bit of a punch out of it. You know, I like the idea of not seeing somebody. You come to the ballpark, you see all this great experience. You know, that's what it's all about. You know, not just interleague play, but all of us together.
You know, we're out here amongst the crowd and in the elements, but back at the studio we still have our nerve center, our usual cast of characters, headed by Matt Lucan, who has put together this epic moment in internet history. Matt, I'm interested in you and your thoughts on just, you know, the whole mystique of American League, National League, because you've told me on several occasions privately that you wanted to see the Reds play the Indians at least a dozen times.
No, I think you're making that point up.
Oh,
I do think when I was growing up in Cincinnati, it seemed like the game meant more to the players. I don't know if that's true. I think players back in the day didn't make a lot of money. They didn't feel like they had accomplished something just because they did accomplish something by making a major league squad. But when they went out on the field, they felt like the reputation was on the line and that things meant more, and they did not want to. Greg, you might comment on that. But Papo had a story where he said, Mickey Mantle said they just looked at it as a party and they were drinking for 3 days, and the American League didn't take it as serious. But I know when I was younger, I got the impression, reading the paper, seeing guys on TV, that they wanted to go out there and prove that they felt like they were in the National League, and the National League was better than the American League, and we had one chance a year to prove that, and this is the night we're going to do it.
Well, look at Rose Fosse. I mean, that exemplifies that point exactly, Matt. I mean, they played the game serious then. They played it to win, and there's a huge level of pride that I just don't think exists as much anymore.
Well, there was much more loyalty to your league and affiliation with your league than there is today. And I think Rose will tell you this, and other guys too, that back when in the 60s, Warren Giles, president of the National League, it meant everything to him to beat the American League. And he would go through the locker room pregame meeting. Come on, you guys, we got to beat these guys. We got to beat these guys. I guarantee you there's nothing like that kind of spirit or atmosphere today.
Well, the National League office was here in Cincinnati.
It was here.
Giles watched the Reds on a daily basis.
There are no league presidents anymore, right?
No.
It's all one big happy family.
But I remember Phil Rizzuto on a lot of Yankee broadcasts would talk about a player that would come over from the National League, and he would almost say with disdain, he's a National Leaguer. And I'm sure it went on the other side. He said when Slaughter, Slaughter, who had a big game here, I think in 53.
53.
When, Slaughter came to the Yankees for just a brief moment at the end of his career, that he was sneered at as being a National Leaguer. I mean, that's just, there was some sort of disdain.
Especially in that time period, because the American League was clearly the superior league. And then it's flipped. There was a long stretch. In fact, one of my favorite All-Star stats is that, and now I'm going to blank out on his name, Brooks Robinson was played in 15 or 16 All-Star games, 15 losses. Wow. He had the most losses. He played the most losing games. But I mean, there was that stretch of time there in the 60s and into the 70s when the National League was the dominant team. And then, of course, in the aughts, late 90s, mid 90s through about 2008, 9 or whatever, the American League was so dominant. It's really been interesting how it's swung back and forth over. You'd think the best players in each league would be pretty even year to year, but
that's a good point, Greg. I mean, and I just kind of wonder about that too, because do you think that the American League for that stretch, or for when it was the National League, that they really were that much more dominant over the other league, or is there a level of chance, or is there a level of taking the game more seriously, or what comes into that? Because it's not like that 16-year stretch the American League won the World Series every time.
I know, you'd think it'd be a flip of the coin, right? I mean, just the chances, it'd be a pretty 50-50 shot. That's a good question. I don't know. I have no answer to that, but I do know that at various eras in All-Star history, one league has really dominated the other. Brooks Robinson knows about it, that's for sure.
Matt, what were you going to say?
Well, I think that I was going to question sort of what Mike said when he said the American League was better. I think the American League was perceived as being better because the Yankees were in the American League. But I think it was the kind of thing, I felt like the overall talent, and maybe it's because I didn't see American League games as much, but I felt like the overall talent level was higher in the National League, but they didn't concentrate it as much as maybe the Yankees did in the American League.
It was more spread more even, and it wasn't just one great team.
Right. I mean,
although the Cardinals were always historically, in the early 60s were pretty darn good, and the Phillies for that matter as well.
Oh, the Dodgers and the Giants. I mean, that was the Mays and McCovey and Marischals and the Koufax and the Drysdales. I mean, the National League did not want, no lack of talent, no lack of certainly Hall of Fame caliber talent.
Well, another big difference, too, is just how many baseball games are on TV now.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it used to be the All-Star game was one of a select number of games that you could watch. So there would be games where you only got the games that were on in your local market. And if you were a National League market, you might not ever see the American League players on TV even. And now the All-Star Game was your chance to see everyone. It used to have like, you know, a game a week kind of thing. And now you can find any game at any point in time, in any market, anywhere, online or on TV.
So I grew up in the New York City market, and at one time when I was very little, we had 3 teams, but I was a Yankees fan growing up. And I would get it.
So easy.
Ouch.
Yeah. That is so easy.
It was in the mid-'60s, Matt, when they had Ruben Amaro, Bill White. Okay, it wasn't like they had Mantle and Maris at their prime.
That's never going to sit well with Red
Charlie
anywhere,
Smith.
anytime. I don't care if you grew up in George Steinbrenner's house. Okay? We don't like that. And we're never going to like that.
Let me
sting a little bit.
May I finish my point?
That's right. We beat them in the '76 World Series.
I got at least a chance to see some National League players come in to play the Mets. But I've talked to people that grew up in Baltimore, for example.
Right.
They never got a chance to see National League talent. Even the team that was closest to them, Washington, was an American League city. And so once a year they got to see this game, and once a week maybe they got a chance to see a National League team. And that's where I think maybe baseball has just oversaturated us with TV and with interleague play. Anyway, I want to move on. Got the trade deadline coming up. You heard about this, right?
We have.
You've heard that the Reds are like 6 million light years out of first place. You heard that, right?
Still?
All right, so my question is, we have Lee May, Joe Morgan, Frank Robinson, Tony Perez, Pete Rose, all right? What was the biggest trade the Reds have ever made? Was it the one that got Robinson out of here, and that would be on the bad side of the equation, or the one that got Joe Morgan here, which would be on the good side of the equation, if you had to weight either one of those two trades?
At the time, the Joe Morgan trade was not considered. Lee May was a good player, and he was very beloved here. And many people at that moment did not know how good Joe Morgan would be, and it was not considered a good trade, I think, by most Cincinnati fans at that time.
But I've heard Sparky Anderson say that the minute he found out about it, he told Bob Hausum, "You just won the pennant."
Yeah, I think they did think they were a couple of years away with the Morgan deal, because I don't think they felt like they had the overall depth. But Joe Morgan turned out to be not just an all-star caliber player, which he was in Houston. He'd made several all-star teams. But he turned into a Hall of Fame caliber player.
Right.
And you know, when you talk to Joe, what does he say? He said it was because he was lockered next to Pete, and it was the atmosphere in that locker room, and he wanted to be at the level of those guys. And they just lifted his game. And, you know, you just don't find many guys at age 29 or 30 that suddenly blossom into a Hall of Famer the way that he did. But to answer your questions about the trade, I'll just throw a screwball out there. And I'll say the George Foster deal might even have been better in terms of what the Reds gave up versus what they ended up getting. They gave up May and Tommy Helms for Morgan. But for George Foster, future MVP, future home run champ of the Reds, they gave up nobody to get this young fifth outfielder for the Giants in 1971. I just think that was an absolute steal.
Well, there's a couple other more recent ones. Obviously, Foster, Morgan, getting a Hall of Famer. But I mean, you look at within a couple month period in 2006 when the Reds traded Willie Mo Pena for Bronson Arroyo, and then nobody for Brandon Phillips because the Indians were designating him for assignment. So within like 2 months, I think it was Krivsky was the GM there, got two guys who were cogs of the team for
half a dozen
years,
or more,
for virtually nothing. I mean,
great.
And I think that was one of the. I think if I were Bob Castellini, I went back and I would do one thing differently. I would not have gotten rid of Wayne Krivsky. I think that guy, and before him, Dan O'Brien, laid the complete foundation for 2012. And the rest has just been spare parts.
I agree completely.
Paul O'Neill, though, that was a little tear for me. Seeing him go. That was. I mean,
trading Paul O'Neill.
Amazing. Yeah, that was.
Who did they get for him? Roberto Kelly?
Who then they flopped into Deion Sanders.
Deion Sanders, right? Yeah.
Wow.
There was also,
Yankees,
the other it was in part a free agent signing, but it was in part a trade. Was the King Griffey deal in 2000? And that really, as it turned out, sent this team into a kind of a free fall for about a decade.
Yeah, because they never surrounded him with pitching.
They never spent the rest of the money.
Well, they spent a lot of money on him.
But the way that franchise was being operated, and it's the way Carl Linder operated a lot of his franchises. He didn't care if he made money. He didn't want to lose money. And I think he's viewed that as, okay, I've spent this. If I spend any more, I'm going to lose money, which led Jim Bowden to bring in a parade of, gasoline cans, 35 sometimes in spring training. It would be like literally like an open audition on Broadway to find 5 starting pitchers. And it's because Linder didn't want to spend any more money on the team.
Yeah.
Well, but Ken Griffey Jr. got hurt a lot. You're right that he wasn't on the kind of team that would support him, but he hardly played that many games. I looked. In the 90s, he averaged getting about 48 home runs a year. When he came to the Reds, he hit 40 home runs once. He just couldn't. He wasn't the physical player. He kept pulling that hamstring, and he just kept going down, and he would be hurt. Yeah, I mean, and he would have had to have been playing better than he did in Seattle. It wasn't as good a team, but he kept getting hurt. That was the biggest problem, and he just never could perform up to the level that he wanted to perform
He was
at.
Mickey Mantle.
Yeah.
If you look at Mantle's career, he's in the Hall of Fame by age 30, just like Griffey was, Jr. was. And then his 30s were pretty mediocre, and in part due to injuries. And that's one of those roll of the dice you just never know. But that trade, I think that was a very impactful trade for the Reds in the wrong direction.
But you know what, Mike? If you know what, if they had the semblances of something going on. They had Griffey, they had Dunn, they had Kearns. They had their young guys up.
Yeah.
They had a very young or relatively young Aaron Boone at third base. They had Sean Casey at first. They had a lot of nice pieces in and around there. They just they didn't have the pitching.
Yeah.
Well, and they were coming off 99 when they had an amazing season.
Yeah.
They had Pokey Reese and
Kevin Mitchell, right?
No,
he was old before
He was
that.
gone.
Okay.
99 they had
gone.
Greg Vaughn.
Greg
But
Vaughn,
Greg Vaughn, that was a
yeah.
1 year.
Yeah.
That was
He
a
was the
great
first
1
guy
year.
that
That
they
may be
let
the
wear
best
baseball
1 year
hats.
signing.
Yeah.
Dimitri Young was on that team.
What about also, we're talking about trade deadline deals. What have been some of the best trade deadline deals for the Reds? Because all the ones we've talked about have been off-season deals.
Yeah. I think David Wells in '95 was a very good trade deadline deal for them. I mean, it got them in the playoffs. It got them a series win.
And C.J. Nitkowski never really did much of anything. So.
No, I think that was a pretty good deadline deal.
Yeah.
Who's going? Cueto's gone. I mean, they have to trade Cueto. They have to trade Leak. You can't be sitting at the end of the year with both of them. I think that's a given. Don't you think, Greg?
I think if the analysis is this team cannot compete this year, then it's just a question of how much house do you want to clean.
Right.
Yeah.
But I don't know that I think the Reds have made that decision, but I don't know. My guess is they have. My guess is you're going to see some of these guys move, and from a salary perspective, they need to do it, and they need to bring in some new young prospects. One of the difficulties you've had over the last 3 or 4 years is not enough young guys have percolated up to the point where they're ready to play.
They haven't. There's something wrong in the pipeline because it's impossible to draft poorly. We had a show on this, Greg, a couple of weeks ago. It's impossible to draft poorly in this sport anymore. First round, second round especially. So there's got to be a glitch. Here's the question. Cueto is up for that last player in the All-Star. What happens if Cueto doesn't get it and doesn't make the All-Star game? Would you go ahead and trade him tonight? If the deal's on the table, just trade him tonight. I would.
Maybe he's
got the
already
right deal.
traded.
Trade him.
Hashtag vote Cueto.
Yeah.
But if he doesn't, regardless of whether he does or he doesn't, you can't be sitting at the end of the year with nobody in return for 2 players that are going to walk. You have to make that deal.
I think you have to weigh what you would get out of trading Cueto versus the draft pick you're going to get back. And if you can't get an offer that's going to match that draft pick, then you hang on to him.
But your pick is going to be a sandwich pick. It's going to be a compensatory pick after the first round.
After the first round. So, but I mean, what kind of trade value does Cueto have?
But if
right
you could
now?
pick up somebody's number 1 or number 2 draft choice from a couple of years ago, I mean,
then you go
somebody
for it.
that's
You gotta go for
and
it.
that's what you're going to hold out for, and that you ought to be able to put together a pretty good package. Johnny Cueto's got a lot of value to somebody out there,
Yeah.
and so does Mike Leake.
Yeah,
and
Chapman.
so. And Chapman's
Chapman probably
certainly
has
in
the
the
most
mix for
value.
next year. That he's a possibility. I mean, partly too, it's a function of how far down the road do you want to look. You say, okay, we're going to go into a rebuilding phase. Is it's going to be 217, 218, and then you start looking at this lineup and you say, are these guys going to play an impactful role in 2018, when we're ready to go again?
Yeah.
And you start making it's tough, hard decisions, and it's a tough business. And the other part about it is, unfortunately, guys, the older you get, the less productive you are.
That's exactly right.
I mean,
That's
it's
exactly
just a
right.
cruel fact of
Not in
life.
television, though.
Not in television.
By By the way, we just
not for historians.
We just had a flatbed truck with about a half dozen portalets pull up behind us. Matt, did you arrange that?
Well, we're trying to be prepared for all contingencies. That's all I can say. All right, it's a big week down there.
It is.
Where do we get a beer around here?
Huh?
Where do we get a beer around
Right over
here?
there.
All right, all right.
$6, you get whatever you want.
I'm waiting for lunch right here. What's going
$6,
on?
whatever you want. Let's talk about this week in Reds history, because Greg's a historian. We love history. 1989, which by my count is 26 years ago right now. Tom Browning just misses becoming the first pitcher in big league history to throw 2 perfect games when Dickie Thon, not Dickie Thong, but Dickie Thon, leads off with a double in the ninth and breaks up his bid. Tom Browning's one of my all-time favorite guys, and my guess is he probably didn't even know he had a perfect game in the ninth.
Well, the thing about Browning either, he doesn't fall in that category of that dominant strikeout guy with a lot of heat. I mean, Tom was a 90-mile-an-hour fastball pitcher with a screwball. And yet you're right. And he had at least one. I think he had another one-hitter somewhere in his career.
Yep.
The guy, when he was really, really good, he was very hard to hit. Why don't more guys throw a screwball today? What the heck happened to that?
How do you throw a screwball? Is it like the opposite of a curve?
It's the opposite of a curve.
Pronate.
You're pronate.
Cut it in.
Pronate.
Doesn't that hurt your elbow though when you do that?
That's, I think, supposedly why. But I read a really interesting, I think, New York Times or Wall Street Journal piece that showed that there actually is no more stress on the arm throwing a screwball than throwing a curveball. I mean, no matter what, you do the same repetitive motion over and over and over and over and over again.
Eventually, something's going to break
it's
down.
It's going to hurt your arm.
Yeah.
But a screwball is actually no worse for you than other things. There's a fascinating story, and talking about the whole thing with supposedly Carl Hubble, like his arm was like permanently turned in, and it was like I don't know. It was like I don't know whether that's actually true or whether that's just
it's like every old catcher you'd see. They got gnarly fingers.
Can't get up out of a crouch like Devin Mesoraco.
Right.
Hey, that's where I throw the knuckler.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The fewer
so that's
people,
your 50.
Yeah,
as fewer and fewer people can throw that pitch, it's not taught. I mean, it's just not passed along. And then teams get this knuckleball pitchers scare a lot of teams. They don't have catchers that have caught them before.
Yeah.
It's interesting how those things start to fade away if you don't keep them up.
And then on the very next night, on July the 5th, that was the infamous night when Paul O'Neill, thinking that he had lost the game by bobbling a fly ball to right field, drop kicks the ball. I think it was Benzinger who caught it on the bounce, and they hold the runner from advancing. They lost the game eventually, but that was the famous Paul O'Neill drop kick.
Yeah, that's been one of our blooper reel highlights forever in the Reds Hall of Fame. I mean,
so good.
Have you ever seen it? Have you ever seen that happen?
Wait, Ken, you said he thought he lost the game. You mean he didn't do that on purpose?
According to O'Neill.
It was a perfect kick.
If he wouldn't have kicked it, if he wouldn't have kicked it in at that moment, and the guy actually, I think Jeltz should have scored, but for some reason the third base coach held him up. If he scores, if O'Neill can't have that happen at that very moment, the run's going to score and the game's going to be over. So I think he just, in frustration, kicked at it, not thinking it was really going to be effective, but he caught it solid and went right to Benzinger on one hop. But yes.
It was.
And you can see Benzinger start laughing as soon as he's catching the ball.
And I think Pete was still the manager then, right? He had not been banished yet.
Right. No, it was a funny thing. That night I was watching ESPN, and Charlie Steiner had a great line. He's on ESPN, the guy who used to do boxing all the time, and he did SportsCenter. He said, "You can run on the arm, but you can't run on the foot of Paul O'Neill."
So we got Fan Fest coming up at the Duke Energy Center, and a great chance to get some autographs. Paul O'Neill will be among the group. Yes. And I mean, the players that are here, Fingers, Tion. One of my all-time favorites, Lou Brock. My two favorite players were Mickey Mantle, who I thought was the most exciting player I ever saw, and Lou Brock, who I thought was the best player I ever saw. I mean, Lou Brock to me was just everything. And Foster and Parker and Morris showing up. I mean, it's Greg. In '88, we had the national show here at the ballet place up the street. Music Hall, thank you. The ballet place. Historical
This is the baseball place.
No wonder they had trouble with that levy.
Symphony, maybe? I don't know.
Okay. Anyway, so they had it up there, and Muhammad Ali was there, and it was great. It was like the epicenter of fandom. This is even that on steroids now. I think this is going to be great if you're a fan and you want some autographs from vintage Major Leaguers.
Well, that's one of the great things about, as we've talked about with the All-Star Game. There's such a constellation of talent, not only on the field, but you get all the old stars. A lot of these guys come back. I mean, it's almost like being up at Cooperstown for the induction weekend, seeing this lineup.
Cooperstown comes to you.
That's right.
Yeah, or Reds Hall of Fame. We do pretty well on Reds Hall of Fame weekend when we get all the big red machine guys in here. We get a lot of Cooperstown guys in here for that. And so the lineup of Red Stars, the lineup of course, the celebrities in here for the Legends game. I'm anxious for that truck to get past us. I'm anxious to see Andy Dalton swinging the bat at the Legends game. That'll be kind of fun.
Don't hurt yourself.
At that National Card Show in '88, they had all these guys there. The one guy, I guess, that they didn't invite was Bob Feller. So in the middle of this thing on a Saturday, Feller walks in. He's got a bullhorn. He says, "My name's Bob Feller. I'm in the Hall of Fame. I had 98 wins, and I'm sitting here selling autographs at this table. Come get them."
That's awesome.
I mean, it was like, okay,
That sounds like being up in Cooperstown during induction weekend.
In Vegas.
Yeah. So Cueto's in a battle, as we mentioned, for the final roster spot for the All-Star Game. Voting goes on to 4 o'clock, and if you go to WCPO.com, it'll link you to Major League Baseball, MLB.com, and you can vote on the final vote total. But it was like 1% was separating the final four. I want to ask, just throw this out. I understand how you want to empower fans and you want them to vote, but with this whole thing with 35 votes per fan and now vote on limited times for this, I know Major League Baseball loves the numbers, but it kind of junks it up a little bit, doesn't it?
It's a popularity contest first and foremost. I mean, that's the way they've set it up. That's the way, and in some ways it's always been that way, except when the players and the managers and the coaches have voted for the players for the All-Star Game, which has happened at various times.
Yeah.
Most recently in the late in the 60s, because the Reds fans basically, the Royals fans took a page out of the Reds fans playbook because we did the same thing back in 56 and 57, stuff in the ballot box.
I guess is there a way to weight it, Satin, where maybe the manager and the players, their votes count just a little bit more than what the... Can you do that?
I love technology. Twitter, I think there's going to be a big push on Twitter where that's going to happen too. It's almost too much. Let the hometown have a little say. If it comes to your part, get a little say. Get a little bit something more on that. So I think we should have a little push with Cueto here,
Yeah,
I just think that.
I don't know, Mike. To me, I don't know how they came up with 35 votes.
That's too much.
Yeah, the regular voting for the actual starters bothers me a little bit because of that. Who came up with 35? Why
I
not
thought it was 35.
50?
I thought it was 35 in the entire voting process. When I learned it was 35, I know. Now I learned it's 35 a day. That's insane.
I did my 35 per day.
That's definitely going to lead to somebody doing what Kansas City.
Back before this too, when they had the paper ballots that they could pass out at the ballpark. There was nothing to keep you from sitting there punching those punch cards. You could do 100 of them in a game.
Right.
Yeah.
But very few people did that.
Yeah.
But there's always been that element to it.
And they've eliminated most people. They've eliminated people that don't have computers, can't afford to have computers, aren't computer savvy. I think they've eliminated an entire demographic, and that demographic would be 70 plus.
Yeah.
In an effort to jack up these vote totals to make it sound like it's some sort of wildly popular thing, when in essence it's Ralph and Frida out in Kansas City, and Ralph doesn't have a job, and Frida's a chain smoker sitting there, and they're going like this, boom, 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 like that, and all of a sudden there's like 9 Kansas City starters.
Well, and
it's terrible.
So I did 35 one day for Frazier on my mobile phone. And it's the way it's set up. You vote your one time, and then
it's just click.
It's just click, 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 click.
But you have to put in the numbers. That's annoying.
Yeah, you put in the code so it matches, so you're not a robot.
Right.
But
that's annoying.
But it's stupid.
Yeah.
It is stupid. Why would anyone want to do that? Right. And what does that prove?
And you did it.
And I did it.
And I did it.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But is it right? And I think that's the question.
It's like encouraging the lowest common denominator to make the decision.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
How bored are you?
Yeah.
Do you have a life? Okay, well.
And is the game seriously diminished by the fact that it is not the eight best guys out there on the field to start the game.
Yeah.
It does take some of the luster away from it.
Now that they have it meaning so much, which that's a whole nother story that they let it get to that point. It was such a beauty contest that they got to the point where they just put everybody in and they didn't care. And then when you got to the 11th inning, you're like, well, we're not going to get anybody hurt. When Tony Perez hit the home run in 1967, he hit it off Catfish Hunter, and Catfish Hunter had been in the game for 6 innings. It was his 6th inning of work. That wouldn't happen nowadays. That's what happened earlier in 2000, and they shut it down.
Right.
Players don't have that kind of will.
Right. Well, the empty suit, known as Bud Selig, makes this stupid decision. What all he really had to do was expand the pitching rosters. Okay, so instead of having, so just take 10 more pitchers for each league. You mean to tell me there aren't 10 more great pitchers in each league that he couldn't, and therefore, you settle the problem rather than taking this exhibition game and turning it into something that really has an impact in the greatest thing that you have each year, which is your World Series. That's what that guy did.
Well, I agree with you that he's an interesting.
You agree with me?
A Yankee fan?
Hey, I'm like Seinfeld, right? I root for the uniforms now. Because the guys I rooted for are dead. You know, Mickey's not coming back anytime soon.
All
right, so listen, so we're here all week on 9 on Your Side, beginning with Good Morning Tri-State and right through the broadcast day. And then back here again when? Next Tuesday at 1:30.
1:30.
1:30 for another Fifth Mascot. So come on down, see us, talk to us, touch us. Well, maybe just see us, talk to us, buy us something. We accept all kinds of gifts. Greg, it was great having you.
Hey, Ken, thanks so much for the invitation.
Red
Mike,
Hall of Fame and
Mr.
Museum.
Satin, nice to see you guys.
And all of the great folks here from WCPO Engineering, they're the best in the business. We know that because they never let us down. This is available 24/7 at WCPO.com. Download us, and we'll see you next time on the show that Al Gore dreamt about the night before he invented the Internet. That is the Fifth Mascot.
Ken, I thought you said I invented the Internet.
That's right, I'm sorry. The show that Mike Canan dreamt about while talking to Al Gore the night before he invented the Internet.